the end of a really long week, and you know what that means. It's time for the brief. Here are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Even though Russians launched one of the most massive attacks on Kyiv to date since the beginning of the invasion on February 24th, they might be losing their grip. Did Kyiv come out of the attack practically damage-free? Just as we thought the World Cup could not get any worse after they decided to hold it in Qatar, that has a lot of issues with human rights, it got a little worse. Zelenskyy has offered to do a commencement peace speech, and the answer of the FIFA president was shocking. But was it? And of course, we're gonna go over one of the hottest topics that everybody has requested so much, but I haven't gotten the chance to go over in the brief yet, so we're gonna do it today, and that is, what's up with the invasion from Belarus? Is it gonna happen? What's the latest on that? With that, hi, my name is Yulia and you're watching the brief end of the week edition, where we discuss everything that happened in and pertaining to Ukraine in the past 24 hours, as well as highlight all of the most important events of the week in under 20 minutes. Except this week, the information for the past 24 hours has been kind of sparse, so we're flipping it and we're focusing on everything that happened this week. Let's go. Here's everything that happened in the past 24 hours that I consider important. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy came out with a statement that Russia deported about 2 million Ukrainians. Many of them are children. He then said that a lot of the employees of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant were offered to take their children to rest in camps in Russia and then blackmailed. Why? So they would cooperate with the occupiers at the nuclear power plant. Zelenskyy questioned, what was it? Deportation? Hostages? This is terrorism. According to him, there are a lot such cases of blackmail of various employees at different enterprises that were under occupation. And while that was happening, Kherson experienced another round of hostile shelling. Preliminarily, 12 missiles were shot at Kherson, 2 people were killed and 4 were wounded. Meanwhile, in the bunkers of Kharkiv, as you might remember, it's the city that gets shelled almost every day since the beginning of the full-scale invasion on February 24th. People are watching the soccer cup. And even with no electricity and even with bombings, they figured it out. There are these points of invincibility, which are basically shelters that have been opened in various cities in Ukraine, where you can recharge your phone, where you can connect your electronics, where you can take a shower, where you can sleep, and they are all safe. So people brought their TVs and were watching the World Cup together. Take a look.
І зараз буде дуже цікавий момент. Офсайда нет.
Ukrainians are huge fans of soccer. While Ukrainians are figuring out how to make do, Russia continues burning. There was another large-scale fire recorded in the Siberia region of Russia. It broke out at the Markovskaya oil and gas condensate field, and it's said to have produced 4 victims. Here's the video.
Пизда, Ваня, завод въебал нахуй. Хули сказали эвакуация нахуй.
Another Russian oligarch who was in construction business was found dead in his house abroad. He died in France after falling down the stairs. Interesting how all of these Russian oligarchs keep falling down the stairs and falling out of windows. You really should work on your mobility skills. Seems like, you know, doors, windows, stairs, dangerous areas for you. And of course, their deaths are completely not related to the invasion, which, by the way, according to the Ukrainian Intelligence Directorate, was postponed by Putin 3 times before he finally decided to send the troops in on February 24th, 2022. Here's what the head of the main intelligence directorate, Vadim Skibitsky, had to say. The FSB insisted on the beginning of the offensive. They were convinced that they had sufficiently prepared for the invasion. They invested huge resources and pushed the head of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, to attack. And eventually, Gerasimov succumbed, and well, now we're here seeing the glory of the Russian troops in Ukraine. The glorious demise, that is. And the last thing for the recap of the past 24 hours has to do with Pope Francis. He called the war in Ukraine global and does not believe that it will end in the near future. And in the meanwhile, the Vatican confirmed its apology to Moscow after the Pope singled out Russian minorities' cruelty in the war against Ukraine. Now, you know, while it's not just the Russian minorities, although they are being sent to the front line en masse and therefore commit the most crimes purely based on how many of them are there, should not be singled out. No one should apologize to Moscow for anything. The Pope just apologized to a terrorist state for calling out its terrorist residents for committing a genocide? Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Let's address this week's news. We're gonna start with a healthy dose of our favorite, Russian madness. The masterpiece that you're seeing on the screen right now is an excerpt from a Russian publication titled "Mobilization Treats Drug Addiction and Defeats Banditry. These and 7 other positive reasons to go to the zone of special military operation." So basically, hey, are you an alcoholic or a drug addict? We have a solution for you. Go die on the front lines in Ukraine, and you're definitely gonna get rid of your addiction and your life. Good luck. Oh, you thought that was it? No. We were blessed with some more humorous content. On one of Russia's most popular propaganda channels, Russian State Duma politician Pyotr Tolstoy has voiced this opinion.
Мы сожжем напалмом всю эту европейских гуманистов вместе с их
что не
оружием
начинаем,
на территории
спрашивают
Украины.
меня мои друзья.
Мы не
смотрят, что
начинаем, потому что
начинаем?
нам гражданских жалко. Понимаешь?
А они тогда
Жалко.
куда денутся через 5-7 лет?
Oh, I see. So you feel sorry for the European civilians, but bombing Ukrainian civilians is just a whole different ordeal. It's fine. Such a heartfelt statement, since Russians are notoriously so concerned for civilians. So concerned for civilians. Let's start with the first headliner. Russians kept incessantly shelling Kyiv in what was known as one of the biggest attacks on the city since the beginning of the full-scale invasion on February 24th. Over 40 missiles have been sent onto Kyiv alone. For the record, that's about 10% of the missiles that Afghanistan got in 10 years of war. But in good news, 37 of them were taken down by our air defense. Now, it did result in a huge blackout, in lack of water supply, and a lot of inconvenience for Kyiv residents. But unlike most of the other strikes, only one critical infrastructure facility has been hit and 9 private houses were damaged. Now, I fully understand that this is still a lot, but think about it. Our air defense is working so well. And that is why it is so critical for the West to transfer those Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, because we can fully prevent strikes like that and no critical civilian infrastructure is going to be hit at all. Also, if you think about it, taking down 37 out of over 40 rockets that were all launched at the same time onto one city is a huge accomplishment in air defense. And while Kyiv did so well under this shelling, not all of Ukraine did. That day, all of the regions of Ukraine were under air alert and so many other cities were hit. Kherson was left without water. Zaporizhia was left without electricity. Sumy had registered airstrikes. So many cities. Take a look at this air raid alert map. Obviously, everything you see in red are the areas that were in danger. Perhaps with that in mind and looking at all of the ruined Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, Lithuania has signed a contract to purchase 8 HIMARS systems, and 20 more are being purchased with other Baltic countries together. Now, they said that of course they know that Russia is going to continue crying out that NATO is getting stronger and stronger at their border, but they don't care because they just want to protect themselves, and I respect that. We should all respect that. The first deliveries of those systems are expected in 2025, so let's hope that Russia is going to be defeated by then and will not be in any position to cry out for anything and is going to be paying reparations and renewing Ukraine's infrastructure. Meanwhile, here's what happened worldwide. FIFA rejected Zelensky's request to share a message of peace at the World Cup finale in Qatar this Sunday. The reason for that? Oh, they didn't state one. It's unknown. But provided that earlier this month, FIFA's president said that Ukraine quite literally should freeze the war and, you know, simultaneously let Ukrainians die and be tortured in the concentration camps, filtration camps, or whatever Russians are calling those, just so people could watch the World Cup in peace. But if they're not gonna show Zelensky's message, I will. So here it goes.
Warm greetings from Ukraine to all fans of football, live
and peace. I congratulate the whole planet on the World Cup final. Today we'll witness a common victory, the celebration of human spirit. This World Cup proved time and again that different countries and nationalities can decide who is the strongest in the fair play, but not in the playing with fire, on the green playing field and not on the red battlefield. This is the dream of so many people when players compete, making everybody enjoy peace. Every father would like to take his son to a football match all over the world, and every mother would like her son to be back from war. Whenever it is, Ukraine strives for peace more than anything else. We offered peace formula to the world, absolutely fair. We offered it because there are no champions in war. There can be no draw. So I announced the initiative to hold a global peace formula summit this winter, the summit to unite all nations of the world around the cause of global peace. Stadiums, stands get empty after the match, and after the war, cities remain empty. That's why wars must fail, and peace is to become the champion, as it is here in Qatar now. The World Cup, but not the World War. It is possible. Please support Ukraine in our efforts to restore peace. Join Global Peace Formula Summit and become a champion of peace. Let's witness the final together and the end of war. Slava Ukraini and happy Qatar Day.
This was an incredibly inspiring speech, and I wish we could all see it on big screens worldwide, but alas. Following this rejection, Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Minister Dmytro Kuleba criticized FIFA for their actions. Once again, FIFA showed hypocrisy under the name Sports Outside of Politics. But we will destroy this Carthage. World sports organizations and officials have been hiding behind this phrase for too long. We have broken down many walls in the minds of foreigners regarding the supply of weapons, the imposition of sanctions, and the perception of war in general. We will also destroy the wall of indifference and hypocrisy of world sports organizations to the criminal aggression of the Russian Federation. And humbly, I want to say that I agree with him to an extreme. It's such hypocrisy, and it's so tone deaf in the middle of the largest military conflict since World War II to not only say, hey, we want you to freeze the conflict so people could watch soccer, because, you know, we'd like our money, and we wouldn't want them to be distracted and not watch the soccer so we could get even more money. But also to say, oh, you know, after we said that, the president of the country who is experiencing the largest aggression since World War II asked us to share a message of peace, and we're just like, not into it. Yeah, I've got nothing more to say. Kuleba said it all. But not all international news are disappointing. In fact, one country continues to surprise us mostly with its flip-flopping. But this week, the wind carried it in the right direction. Hungary, out of all places, froze Russian assets worth 870 million euros, while previously it amounted to only 3,000. It is noteworthy that a significant amount of sanctioned assets were found in Hungary in November, right when Viktor Orban's government's struggle for European budget for Hungary began. So while Putin is questioning Hungary's loyalties, here's how other countries supported Ukraine's fight for freedom this week. Bulgarian parliament finally approved an arms deal for Ukraine. However, all the information on what weapons we're getting is classified, so we're gonna have to wait for that one. The United States is preparing a new military aid package for Ukraine and says that it's gonna include a lot more air defense systems. Here's what John Kirby had to say. As you've seen in previous packages, I think you can expect to see additional air defense capabilities in this one too. And right after that, the Biden administration followed up with asking the Congress to allocate additional $38 billion to Ukraine. Let's see what they say. Then British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has ordered an audit to see how the aid from the UK has impacted the war in Ukraine. Basically, the British government believes that Rishi Sunak's cautious approach to supporting Ukraine could prevent further military aid coming from the UK at what is known to be a critical time for securing Ukraine's victory. So I wouldn't say that Sunak's approach is quite cautious, but it is definitely not as out there, outspoken, and loud as Bojo's was. And then NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg concluded this week's foreign statements of support by saying that partners should continue providing aid to Ukraine because Russia is planning new offensive and continuous prolonged war. So weapon supplies should continue until the Russian president realizes that he cannot win on the battlefield. I mean, that might take time and lots and lots and lots of copium. because, you know, the whole world realized that already, but he doesn't seem to have, so brace yourselves. And of course, we're gonna discuss Belarus and Russia. So one of the hottest topics in the past month has been the invasion of Ukraine coming from Belarus, and I want to discuss that. First and foremost, I want to say that it's highly unlikely because Lukashenko, the self-appointed president of Belarus, is stuck between a rock, the European Union, and a hard place, Putin. He's a dictator, and at the end of the day, all he cares about is staying in power as a dictator. So he's gonna go with whatever wind is going to keep him as a dictator longer, right? Right now, his situation is that if he gets involved in the invasion of Ukraine directly by sending his military in, the people of Belarus are going to overthrow him, and once Putin loses, which he knows Putin is gonna lose, he's not an idiot, he's just a dictator, the European Union is gonna sanction him so hard that Belarus is not gonna survive that. And that also threatens any possibility of ever having any relationship to the EU or the rest of the world if he stays president, which directly threatens his dictatorial rule. If he doesn't send the troops to Ukraine and doesn't help Russia, Putin right now can still do something because, you know, it's a big old Soviet commie leaders symposium where they're all interconnected. So he's trying to delay this invasion as far as he can and give Putin an inch every single time, whether it be activating air defense, activating mobilization, building a pontoon bridge, basically anything that hints on him possibly joining the war. But the reality is he can't, because that'll directly threaten his personal goal of staying in power. Despite that, it is believed that in his next visit to Minsk, which is planned, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is going to try and pressure Lukashenko to make concessions on the integration of the two countries in terms of the war in Ukraine. According to the Institute for the Study of War, the visit to Minsk might indicate that Putin is trying to create conditions for a renewed offensive on Ukraine from Belarus, possibly in the north of the country or in Kyiv in the beginning of 2023, which does echo the words of Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who said that he thinks that that invasion is possible, but of course, he doesn't know for sure. No one does. However, right now, the risk of a Russian invasion coming from Belarus onto Ukraine again in 2023 is assessed as low, but not impossible. It is worth pointing out that the armed forces of Ukraine are expecting a more active involvement of Belarusian military in the war against Ukraine after Putin's visit, at least to show face. In the meanwhile, it does look like the Russian forces are scared of a Ukrainian invasion or offensive on Melitopol, as they have been placing the anti-tank defenses known as dragon teeth, these little triangular cones, everywhere in the city close to civilian areas. So they know that the armed forces of Ukraine can reach the center very soon. Maybe that's why Putin has now started playing the nuclear card again. But the CIA has stated that they see no clear evidence that Russia is planning on using nuclear weapons. In fact, he thinks that Russia is using nuclear weapons as a bargaining chip to intimidate and was never really planning on using them to begin with. According to him, the United States has made it very clear to Russia what would happen to them if they dared. And I agree with them. That's something that I've been saying from the very beginning. Russians are not planning on doing anything. They are just planning on blackmailing the world with the fact that they have nuclear power. So I'm glad we've settled that. Even with this battlefield slowdown, the NSDC Secretary Alexei Danilov sees the future positively. He says that Ukraine will return Crimea and it does not need anyone's permission to do so. I can say the trenches will definitely not help them. Crimea will be returned in the way our military and political leadership decides. If we need to fight for Crimea, we will fight for Crimea, and we will not ask anyone. This is our land, and it must be returned home. And this, if anything, is also a very good ode to those politicians internationally who say, you know, we think it might be a good idea to allow Ukraine to return Crimea militarily if it wants to do so. Well, we're not going to ask for your permission. How is Crimea different from Donbass? It's also our territory, and it's an internationally recognized territory since 1991. And that's all I have, and we're gonna wrap up this video with a shot of the Christmas tree in the central square of Kyiv. And I think it's so symbolic to this invasion because here it is, and normally this tree is really bright, has lots of lights, and it's just fascinating. But this year, it's just a tree with minimal decorations and with one light shining on it. coming from a generator. And if that is not the most telling thing, I don't know what is. So if you liked this video or found it informative, don't forget to give it a like, comment, subscribe to my channel, turn on all of your notifications so you know when the next one comes out, and as always, check your sources and don't fall for propaganda. And I will see you on Wednesday.